First of all, my name's Krish, and I hope young men improve their mental health. Once I've earned your trust, the top link in the description is just a link to my one-to-one coaching if you're interested. So I remember when the COVID lockdown first started. Again, I know I tell this story all the time, but that was when my mental health was at an all-time low. And the one addiction that plagued me the most throughout that time was just video games, by far. And so I remember there was one particular day where my parents just got fed up of me just playing games for so long, every single day, 16 hours per day. And so what happened was they just took away the console. They took away my Xbox. They took away basically everything that I loved at that time, which is literally just a gaming console. How fucked is that? And so they hid it in some random place. And I, being the desperate little motherfucker that I eventually ended up finding it. It was like some corner of my room, apparently, or something like that. So I found it, and the only way that I could play the game was going downstairs into the living room, plugging it into the main TV and playing it. Now the problem is that since COVID was going on, nobody could leave the house. And so my dad was working from home, my brother was working from home, and my mom was also in the kitchen. She was cooking and working and whatnot. And they hated the fact that I played games. Absolutely fucking hated it. Could you imagine if you were a dad that your son plays video games literally for 12 hours a day on weekends, 8 hours a day on school days? He literally stays up until like 2 a.m. playing games. Of course you're gonna be fucking mad. Of course you're gonna be like, come on, we need to stop this, right? And so at that time, I didn't really have a monitor either. I had my own room and stuff, but I didn't have access to a monitor because both my brother and my dad were using the only monitors that we had in our house. So I needed to go down to the living room to play games. But I also needed some way to hide the fact that I was playing them. And so what I did was very late at night, 12 a.m., 1 a.m., or 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m., around there. Most of everybody was gone to bed. My mom was usually gone to bed at this time. My brother's usually gone to bed at this time. It's usually just my dad who's awake. And so I remember several nights I would make sure that my dad went to bed. I would literally make sure like, he's in bed, he's going to sleep, he's gonna watch a movie or something in his room. I made sure of it. And so once he was there, then it was finally my time to do the thing that I actually wanted to do, which was play games. And so I'd hook up the Xbox to the TV, play in silence, because again, if me playing games, if he hears me and playing some Call of Duty or whatever the fuck I was playing at the time, of course he's gonna come down and probably get really angry and probably hit me. So I was afraid of that, as any child should be. And that's what I did for a very long time, which is when everybody else had gone to bed, I would stay up for a long time just playing games. That's it. That's the way that I did it, because at the time, my parents got fed up of me of playing every single day, multiple hours on end. And the way that I actually hid the Xbox was actually kind of interesting too. So for some reason, I was kind of retarded back then, of course. And I didn't think, thought never came into my mind that I should take the Xbox as soon as I'm done playing with it and go hide it in my room upstairs. That thought never came to me because I couldn't play during the day, right? Because I had online school, my parents were working, my mom was in the kitchen cooking and whatnot. There was people moving all over around the house, doing a bunch of stuff. And they were moving all throughout the living room as well. The living room is the place where the TV was too. And so my dumbass did not realize you could just take it upstairs into your room and then hide it and that would have been fine. No. My dumbass was like, you know what? I think it's a smart idea to take a random blanket and just throw it over where conveniently the Xbox was sitting before as well. Because like I would always used to put it over the actual TV router. I always used to put it over that. And so the thought never came into my mind of my parents thinking like, he seems pretty desperate. There's a thing covering basically just like the TV router. My dumbass thought to myself, like, no one's ever gonna like lift up that little blanket or whatever the fuck that I used and like check and see if Xbox is still. My dumbass never thought of that. And I used to do something like extra stupid with the controller as well. Instead of putting the controller underneath the blanket, so everything else was like, hidden there and it would have been fine. I thought it would be a good idea to take a hat, not a cap, an actual wool hat that you wear in the winter, right? That covers your ears. Take that, put the controller in there and put it on the sofa. What the fuck was I thinking? That's so stupid. At least just take the console up and just put it in your room. At least just do that. But apparently my younger self thought that this method would be semi-useful because on the weekends, I didn't have school, and so most of the day, what the fuck was I gonna do? Just sit on my phone and scroll on Instagram and TikTok. Well, obviously that's what I did. But I also wanted to play games too. I really had that urge, that desire, I really had that motivation to just play games the whole day. And this was also the time when, again, everybody was off from work. It was the weekend, right? So, but even then, everybody in the house still stayed in their rooms. Like, my brother still stayed in his room. He had books and whatnot. And my dad still stayed in his room. He didn't really come down that often. He only came down to basically just like shout at me, maybe shout at my mom, and eat food, and that's it. Or maybe to like errands or something. Maybe to like a certain thing. That's only the reason. That's basically the only reason he came down on the weekends. And for the weekdays as well, he only came down just because he wanted to eat food and he wanted to shout at me and my mom. And I so desperately wanted to play during the weekends. And so that's what I did. I would lift up the blanket, I would turn the Xbox on underneath the blanket, put the blanket over it. And if you ever had an Xbox, you know how the logo lights up when you turn it on and it makes like a noise as well. Now, again, you could go into like settings and turn off that noise. But my younger self was like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to use our brains here. And so I would always just like cough or sneeze or mumble to like cover up the sound of like the Xbox, the light sound. You know what I'm talking about, right? When it's like turn it on and it makes like a little ding or whatever the fuck. I would always like cough or do something to make some kind of noise to like cover that up. And I had to choose a particularly thick blanket as well because not only did it make a noise, it also basically just lit up and it was just a mini light. And so if you got a thin blanket, you could see through it and be like, hang on, wait a minute, there's some under there. So what I had to do was I had to get like extra thick blanket. If I didn't have access to an extra thick blanket, I had to like throw two really thin blankets on there. I was desperate, bro, come on. And the weekends, usually they wouldn't be too bad because my mom would sometimes come and see what I was doing. But at that point, she was like, all right, fine, whatever. She just gave up at that point. My dad didn't, and my dad, usually he would come down during the weekends because, of course, he has to eat food. Of course, he has to talk to my mom and whatnot. So what he used to do when he came down was as soon as because I don't know about you, but it's like I can know whose footsteps come down the stairs depending on the cadence, depending on the sound that they make, depending on also impact. I'm talking about, right? When somebody comes down the stairs and like, sitting on the couch, you can tell like this is my mom, this is my dad, this is my brother, whatever, right? And I knew every single time that my dad would be coming down the stairs. Same with everybody else, right? When he would come down the stairs, I had to act fast, swift. I would move swiftly, bro. As soon as I would hear actually his door open, because his room was like near the stairs at that time. Of course, for some reason, he moved rooms a lot. He for some days he used my room a little bit to do his work, and then he used my brother's room a little bit to do his work, and then he used the actual room a little bit to do his work. I don't know what was going on there. I don't know why he can't just stay in one place at one time. Fine, whatever. Usually during the weekends, he would go to his actual room, and his room would be as soon as you walk. Imagine these are the stairs. His room would be directly here. So as soon as you walk up the stairs, you find his room. You just turn right, you open the door, and that's his room, right? Every time I would hear the creak of the door opening, that's when I would act swiftly, immediately, bro. What I used to do was I would turn off the Xbox just immediately because I didn't want to risk it. Blankets could work, but it is better to just leave it off and just complete in utter darkness so like, he can't see. So I would turn it off, and usually it wouldn't, like the light of like the little button that you use to turn on the Xbox, the same button. When you press it again to turn it off, it doesn't just like shut off. The light doesn't just shut off. It goes in and out between on and off. So it would take like a few seconds to do that. And I'm telling you right now, those seconds were really valuable when it comes to these things, right? And so I would do that, turn off the Xbox immediately. Then what I would do was I would take the controller, and you mentioned before, like I used to put it in a hat, a little wool hat that you use in winter to cover your ears and whatnot. I remember keeping the controller in that hat and putting it on the sofa when he came down. And then I would also pull out my phone. I would just sit on the couch and just be acting like I would just like do something on my phone. And He came down and said, "Hey, well, what you doing?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm just hanging out, just like watching some videos on my phone." He's like, "Fine, whatever." And he goes, he does, maybe eats food, maybe eats out of my mom or whatever. And I would always be so afraid of just getting beaten that day because there was nobody could leave the house at the time, and because like pandemic and whatnot. So previously, when my dad used to be at work, that used to be my fun time that I could just play and I just do whatever I wanted to do. But now that he was home every single second of the day, it was always a risk of just getting shouted at, getting threatened, getting beaten again. And I was so afraid of that. But even then, I still wanted to play games. I was so desperately wanted to play games. I just told you that story. And why is it that a lot of people have that sort of like desperation, have that sort of addiction to not only just video games, but just like anything else? Maybe it's your phone, maybe it's porn, maybe it's like drugs or something like that. Why is that? And maybe it's not as simple as an answer of just dopamine. I don't think it is. I think dopamine is certainly, so dopamine is again your form of motivation. It's kind of like basically just a feel good chemical that your brain releases whenever you do something that makes you feel good, right? So whenever we watch porn, we get dopamine. Whenever we play video games, we get dopamine, right? I don't think it's just that. I think that does certainly play a huge part, but from my experience and from what I've basically just like researched of this, I think it's just a form of escapism. That's really what it is. Because I think a lot of addicts, when it comes to basically just drugs in general, because don't cope, video games is a drug, porn is basically a drug. Come on, a lot of addicts to these drugs, I think they're just using it to just escape the real problem. What was the problem for me back then? Well, there was trauma, there was abuse in the household. I remember my dad, there was a few times when my dad actively threatened to basically just like beat me if I didn't stop playing. There's a few times when if I didn't do my homework, if I didn't do my studies, well, he just beat me. There was one time where I think I was on the couch next to my mom. And this is actually not during the COVID. This is when I was younger. I think I was like around 7 or 8 years old or something like that. I was on the couch. I was with my mom watching a movie. And my dad comes in. He says, "Hi, yeah, what's going on, whatever." And I don't exactly remember what I said. I think maybe I said something like just disrespectful to him. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe that's genuinely what it is. I was 8 years old. And so again, you should never disrespect your parents. You should never disrespect anybody like that ever. And I think I said something a little bit disrespectful or something like stupid. But what he did was when he heard that, he basically just went off. Basically, like just like you just went off, and he basically just what he did was I don't want to go into like too vulgar detail, but it's like he basically just grabbed me and beat me more than you're supposed to beat a 7-year-old child, whatever, right? Around that age. And that set the stage for how I looked at my parents, how I looked at basically just my life at that point, how I looked at my, not only just my father, but just everything. So my real life at the time was shit. I wasn't doing well in school. I didn't really have many friends. I was ugly as fuck. No confidence. I was getting abused by my father. I was traumatized at the time. And so when someone's life is so shit like that, what do they do to escape from it? They go to video games. They might go to porn. They might go to some drug, right? And video games was actually really powerful because not only was it a form of escape, I could also just level up because I wanted to level up. I wanted to get better, but I was lazy. I was also lazy as fuck, right? So instead of trying to level up in real life, I leveled up in the game instead. Because again, my real life was so shit that I said to myself, all right, I'm not going to make this better. There's no way I can change this situation. Just cope, really. And I went to video games instead. So I know the title of this video is like, oh, yeah, video games are sabotaging your mental health, but it's like, it's not in the way that you think. Maybe it's just an escape from your traumatized life. Maybe it's an escape from any other problems you might have. So that fucks with your mental health, doesn't it? Fucked with mine. Sure did. I was depressed. I was anxious. 24/7 anxiety was a huge problem for me back then. For the right reason. I guess for the right reason, too. I think actually, you know what? I think in that situation, what do you expect the child to do? What do you expect little me to do? Do you expect little me to be like, I'm just gonna like, quit video games and do all this stuff? That's good. You should do that. But fucking 14-year-old me, really expect him to do that? Probably not, right? You probably expect him to keep playing the games, and maybe in that particular circumstance, maybe he needed that escape. Now, do not hear that. I don't want you to think this. I don't want you to hear this and cope and make excuses and be like, yeah, but I deserve the escape too because of this and this. 99% of the time, you don't. 99% of the time. And I say this in all of my videos, that poor mental health is a lack of discipline. Poor mental health is caused by lack of discipline. And so you can't keep using these habits as an escape. You can't keep doing these drugs basically effectively. That's what they are, right? And thinking that that's the only way to basically just solve the problem. That's the only solution that you can find. I'm telling you right now, it's not. I promise you, it's not the only solution. Actually, you know what? It's not even a solution. Like escapism, video games, and all that stuff, it's not a solution at all because it just makes your life worse. Not only does it make your life worse, it's gonna make the problem, whatever it is you're trying to escape from, it's gonna make that worse. And so it's this kind of like never-ending loop where it's like you keep consuming the drug, but you're using the drug to get away from your shit life. But when you keep consuming the drug, your life gets more shit. And so again, you do more of the drug. And so it's kind of like this self-repeating cycle. The way to break free from that cycle is just take responsibility, increase discipline, improve your mental health. That's really what it is. If you fix your mental health, you can probably fix whatever the problem is. And sorry, I guarantee the problem is just like a shit life. That's probably what it is. That is what it is, basically. So if you improve your life, you improve your mental health, you don't need these addictions anymore to escape from it. Hope this video helped you again. Top link in the description is just my one-to-one coaching if you are interested. Take care.